Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the fifth webinar of the Rebuilding of a Sustainable Economy series by Euro Consumers. My name is Alberto Alemanno, and I will be the moderator. Today, together with a distinguished panel, we will be discussing the challenges and opportunities of a fully functioning European data single market by asking one big question. What does it take to set up a European digital single market, and what's in for consumers? So as usual in this series, we're going to be trying to take the consumer perspective and trying to figuring out what's in for them. By now, data has become a key resource, a new factor of production besides goods, services, capitals, and labor. It is key for economic growth, competitiveness, innovation, and potentially also societal progress in general. We must say that we haven't seen much of it so far, as most of the data have been privately collected. They remain privately held, but now it is the time to ask how we can potentially turn this wealth of data and turn them into the public interest. From a consumer perspective, data-driven applications may be highly beneficial. We're going to hear much more from Els Bruggeman on this. They might be generating new products, new services that might dramatically improve the sustainability that we are really looking for nowadays. So they could play a role in facilitating the green transition. That's why in the title of this webinar, we talk about a green data market. As discussed in a previous webinar, together you might remember data may act potentially as an enabler for the green transition itself. However, the success of a Europe sustainable transformation will very much depend on establishing an effective framework to ensure that consumers do have trust vis-a-vis technologies, old and new, but at the same time, they also need confidence to use them and to feel comfortable when using them, regardless of whether they are software or hardware by themselves. So today, we know that the European Union has published a very ambitious data strategy. It was last February when the Commissioner Breton presented, together with his own colleagues, to set up what is often referred to as the European data single market. And we know how ambitious the project is. We know this is a major legislative package currently under preparation. To discuss many of these issues and better unpack the European data strategy, we have a distinguished panel as anticipated. In particular, we have Kate Charlotte, Director for Data Governance, Government Affairs and Public Policy at Google. We have Lucrezia Busa, who is a member of Commissioner Ryder's cabinet, responsible in particular for data and internal market within the cabinet. We have Sergei Lagodinsky, who is a Green German MEP, who will be joining us in a few minutes. He's currently busy finalizing another file. And as usual, we have Els Bruggeman, Head of Policy and Enforcement at Euro Consumers. Without any further ado, let me turn to Els for an initial question that will be helping us to set the scene for our conversation today. Els, the European data strategy intends to create a single market for data on the assumption that data contribute to and could better facilitate the green transition. But what's in for consumers? Could you please provide us some illustrations to make this more tangible to all of us? What are we talking about when thinking about data in this particular context? Please, Els.
Thank you, Alberto. As the usual suspect here, I will start this very interesting webinar again. Well, we know that consumers, they want to tackle climate change. They want to contribute to the green transition, although they might not always know exactly how. But we know they are asking for sustainable solutions, sustainable alternatives. Well, digital innovation and in particular the use of data can be of help for them. Digitalization driven by data can provide tools that help them realize this green and just transition for them. And it can be very tangible for consumers. Let's take the example of smart water meters. Smart water meters, for example, can measure the of the water and offer tips on reduction. But it can also enable them to adapt to water usage and times of shortage. Same thing with electricity. Data allows consumers to identify the most efficient and cost-effective energy use for individual homes. It can help them to manage peaks, it can indicate when they need to shift to solar energy, etc. Another maybe very tangible example for consumers are grocery purchase data. Because these data, they can identify individual shopping habits and maybe allow them to get a notification with targeted offers on more sustainable and healthy food. So I don't think we disagree anymore on the many opportunities this offers. And we know also from our consumers through data surveys that we have done that they recognize this potential. That's why, as far as Euroconsumers is concerned, there's no such thing as, on the one hand, having a digital transition and on the other hand, having a green transition. No, these are not two separate things. These things are intertwined. So there's no doubt that having a digital single market is, for us, a critical enabler for the transition. However, I think it's very important we keep one thing in mind when talking about the data single market. And is that this data, they don't come dropping out of nowhere. They are generated, they're provided by someone, by consumers. They belong to the consumers, so they should be in charge. And that actually puts consumers in a very important position, because with their data, they can not only enable the development of, for example, sustainable products and services, by deciding who gets access to it and who doesn't, they can use it to play a steering, maybe accelerating role in the path towards more sustainability. However, for consumers to be able to take this role upon them, to do this, a few conditions need to be met. And let me maybe highlight three very concrete points, challenges. We can maybe even call them critical success factors for consumers to be able to play their role also in the digital single market. And the first one is a really important one, and it is trust. If we want consumers to move freely in this digital single market, they need to know they are safe, they are protected, and they are secure. And that's why it's absolutely crucial that we create a robust framework that guarantees this protection, this security, and this fairness. It's an absolute precondition for creating trust, and trust as such is an absolute precondition for consumers to be able to thrive in a digital single market and let it flourish to its full potential. That's the first important precondition, I think. The second one that needs to be met is full empowerment of consumers. You know, these data, they belong to consumers. They should be in charge at all time, being able to take it to whoever they decide can have it, making use of full data portability. We are fully aware that data is absolutely crucial for business to start and startups to develop new innovative products. But let's keep in mind that these data, they don't come out of nowhere. They're provided by consumer, and they cannot just be taken like that. You know, it's the consumer that should be in charge and decide who gets access to it, under what conditions, and only that way consumers will be able to play their active role in the digital single market and ensure a true consumer-oriented and sustainable innovation. And maybe as a last point, finally, and a third one, I would like to point out the value of the data that is provided by consumers. I don't think anyone will deny anymore that consumer data has a huge value, a significant value. I mean, it's the fuel for many businesses, startups, to create new innovative services. And there's a reason why some of us call it the new gold. So what consumers provide has a lot of value. And when they decide to give access to this data for the development of, for example, sustainable products, they should get tangible value in return. It could be a new innovative service, a new sustainable solution, but the value they get in return should be tangible. So these three preconditions, challenges, let's call it trust, empowerment, and recognition of the value of consumer data. Well, this is crucial to let consumers play their crucial role as independent, strong, and equal actors in the digital single market. Only that way I'm convinced that only that way we can ensure a true single market that exploits full potential and actually delivers to the green transition.
Thank you, Else Bruckemann from Euroconsumers, for setting in and highlighting the critical success factor for this data market to emerge, in particular from a consumer perspective. You highlighted trust, empowerment, and recognition of the value of data as precondition. Let me turn now to Lucrezia Busa, who I welcome to the panel from European Commissioner Ryder's cabinet. What is the vision of the European Commission for the realization of such a European data single market? We know about the data strategy, which is very often making the headlines and keeping us, you and us, busy around the legislative package, but how we can get there to make sure that this would be beneficial to all consumers. Lucrezia.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry for being a bit late, connection problems. And but I'm very happy to be with you today and to listen to the discussion and contribute to the discussion. So going back to the single market for data, indeed, it's something that is keeping us all busy on various fronts, on various sides, on the Commission side, but also on the civil society side, on the business side, and various stakeholders are being involved into that, which is a very good thing because it allows the Commission then to come up with solutions that take into account the various perspectives and that also address the various needs of the various stakeholders. The philosophy behind it, just in a nutshell, is of what we are doing, of the work that we are doing with data, is that we realize the importance that data has for the digital economy, for the development and, of the digital economy in Europe, and also in particular now that we are moving through towards a new phase, like the Internet of Things, that will generate more and more data, some of which are business generated data, some of which are personal data, belong to individuals, and some of which are a mix of both. So it's going to be, in the next years, there will be a huge volumes of data to be generated. And the real question is what to do with them and how to make sure that we use them in the best way, given that we all know all the potential that is linked to data when it comes to, and just to mention an example that is very present to all of us, the health sector, that how data can be beneficial for and develop for better understanding a disease. If we associate large volumes of data together with large technology power like quantum computers, so we can process a lot of information and better understand what are the problems for diseases and also provide solutions. But as I was saying before, data is also very important in achieving a more sustainable development on our side. And the Commission sees both the digital and the green transition as the twin transitions, and one going together with the other one. And in all of this, it's important that that we use data also, for instance, to achieve better better farming, but also, as Elsa was saying before, to provide consumers with means that would allow them to better check the environmental footprint of the services or of the products that they are using, and to choose the ones that they believe to be more sustainable. So how we are doing that? We identified a number of obstacles in creating in making the most of the data economy. And one of these is the fragmentation among the different member states. This is why we are going towards a European approach to this, both in terms of regulation and in terms of technical aspects, which will then, we hope, translate into a real single market for data. And this, when I speak about the technical aspects, I refer to problems related to interoperability. I think the for citizens, for instance, the discussions that we are having on apps, on tracing apps, especially for citizens who work across the borders, is very telling in terms of the need to have interoperable application, interoperable solutions. The need to have cybersecurity, to ensure cybersecure solutions. The need to have also infrastructures like cloud and so on that can ensure that data can be stored, processed, and moved. And finally, the legal framework, an important legal framework that can facilitate the availability of data. And this legal framework, and that's the most important, let's say, the most important characteristics of the European Commission approach, should be an approach that is human-centric, that puts the individual at the end, at the center of it, like rather than at the receiving end. And this means that in the way we are looking at it, we are making sure that all the rules related to data protection and fundamental rights are respected, but also going beyond that, that we can have a concrete empowerment, according also in line with what else was saying before, of individuals. Concretely, what we are trying to do is to facilitate the sharing of data through what we call data spaces, and which can be either the idea is to have a big data space for Europe, so which corresponds also to a legal framework that would facilitate the circulation of data in Europe across different sectors, and then on the one hand to provide also some guidance, but also legal framework to allow data spaces also in the various sectors, to facilitate the sharing of data and the availability and reuse of data also in various sectors. The health, environment are of key importance, but speaking about our portfolio, who has a very, is responsible also for consumers' rights and protection. And for us, what we are working on is especially on personal data spaces. And the idea we're working on this together with the colleagues from Cabinet Breton in DG Connect. And the idea is really how to empower citizens to be sure that they make full use of the rights that they have based on the GDPR, the portability rights, but also other rights. And maybe I stop here because I think we can further develop afterwards, also to have more questions.
Thank you very much, Lucrezia Busa, for Reiner's cabinet, for giving us a bit of a flavor of what the Commission envisioned when it comes to the creation of such a data single market. I think we heard from the consumer perspective, we heard from the regulator. It is time we turn to the relevant industry, and we are very glad to have Kate Charlotte from Google, who I previously introduced, but I think at the time she wasn't there, so she hasn't heard about my introduction. I think that the introductory question for you would be, what can tech companies like yours that play a pioneering role in collecting and creating added value for consumers might be playing a role in such a European data single market? This is a very important historical time. There's mounting public scrutiny on companies like yours, both from regulators, but also from the public. How do you expect big tech companies to adapt their products, their services, to somehow realize this dual objective that we have heard of a sort of dual green and sustainable transition? Please, Kate.
Yeah. Thank you. And thanks so much to Euroconsumers and Alberto and the panelists. This is a really important conversation to have and to put the kind of consumer front and center in a conversation like this. We see huge benefit around data and data-driven innovation in support of European growth to create value for consumers and society. And, you know, that's part of the reason why Google welcomes the pursuit of a European data strategy. I guess insofar as a data single market means harmonization of rules across Europe, I think that's a good thing for consumers as well as businesses, large and small. Of course, it's a positive thing for us and helpful, but it also helps small or family-run businesses to find clients across member states to take advantage of data flows. And it certainly increases legal certainty for everyone, even though, of course, there's still work to be done to continue along that path to harmonization. But we think that's a important and valuable goal. And as you mentioned, it also means promoting open data and voluntary data sharing, and that's something where industry can really play a role. I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about this over the course of the conversation, but Google's, from its sort of founding, our mission is to make information universally accessible and usable, and so we have kind of in our kind of core DNA this idea of open data and data sharing. It's why a small group of engineers in 2009 in Chicago made something called the Data Liberation Front, which eventually turned into our data portability tool to allow consumers to move their data back and forth between services. But there's a lot more to do to to help for industry to share data sets, services, software that we can contribute to this broader goal of lifting up and enabling businesses, governments, and consumers. So, I mean, just as an example of some of the data that we think could be useful, right, especially in the green transition, for example, is map data that can help estimate emissions that are coming from buildings within city boundaries, or aggregated and anonymized location history data that can estimate emissions from trips at the start or end of a city boundary, or data on roof size and orientation combined with weather data that can estimate the solar potential of buildings, and that helps cities to plan for their solar rooftop targets and set targets for decreasing emissions. So with the connection of the green transition, with the benefits that brings to consumers, not just in experiencing, and being part of that, but also in the workforce that it creates. And then I'm sure we'll have a lot of kind of back and forth and questions, but I think the other pieces of the data single market are cross-border data flows, whether that's internal, but also outside of the market with proper protections, of course. And it means supporting strong and smart privacy regulations to make sure that trust that you were talking about, Alberto, is there and enables the innovation to continue as well.
Thank you, Kate. Very useful to get your perspective on this. I wanted to engage with the only political representative among us, but I think he hasn't arrived yet. Sergey is not there. So what I would like to do now is to go back to Lucrezia and to get a bit of a sense of one particular concept that already pop up in our conversation, which is the concept of reuse of data. So data, they have this incredible property, the fact that it could be used by many, an endless number of people without necessarily modifying the nature of those data. So there's a big question how we can unleash the potential of those data and how we can promote and foster a culture of data sharing, which currently is not there. So Lucrezia, can you give us a sense of what is the Commission perspective on this? And I really have to make a disclosure on this. having been a member of the expert group on B2G data sharing and the rapporteur, obviously I have some ideas about how you're going to answer, but probably, you know, since February, a lot of things have been happening and you can further unpack the perspective of the Commission on data sharing. And we're focusing more, I would say, from a consumer perspective on the B2G, on the business to government, public interest, public sharing, rather than B2B at the moment. Lucrezia.
Thank you. So indeed, we are trying to look at solutions on how to facilitate the reuse of data. If we are doing that from different perspectives, I will try to focus more on the B2G and G2B, and more also with the consumer angle. But just to say that also we are looking at the B2B, and which is important also in a discussion among when we speak about consumers and consumers' rights, because I mean, the more we facilitate, if we start from the premise that data will help will help new companies to develop and enter the market, then ultimately beneficiaries should be consumers. So there is also a discussion that we are having, that should be had there, on what to do on B2B in a way that ultimately benefits consumers. And I'm thinking in particular also on the emergence of new services, often like in markets that are either neighboring markets or upstream or downstream markets to markets that are already existing and where already there are companies present. Because, for instance, if we go to the environmental and the energy and think about energy and environment, there is a huge potential for developing energy services, like especially when it comes to energy saving, that would be of a great importance for consumers, and for which a lot of startups or others are working, or the consumers themselves, but for which they need access to important data that is often held by large companies. It could be utilities, or it could be in the energy sector, in the transport sector, or others. If we go back to the business to government and government to business dimension, the Commission has already looked in the past and what is at the possibility of sharing, for instance, public data. It has looked at high-value data sets and how this could be reused for also for social and collective purposes. And it's in the same vein that we'll also look at how also the Open Data Directive has done that. So it's in the same vein that it will look also at how to clarify the existing framework, and also to work on a new framework to allow both that businesses can share data with the government, and the other way around, also that publicly held data could be shared eventually with business, but with ultimate aim of achieving public good. In terms of how to facilitate this from a consumer perspective, there are, I think, two important things that need to be looked at. First of all, it has the consumers, when it comes to personal data, have to give their consent, because this is personal data. This needs to be so they need first to be informed about the use that is given to this data, for which the data is collected and then reused. And then so the information has to be full, has to be appropriate, and they need to be in a position to choose. Very often I hear the term data donation. On our side, data is a fundamental right. So this we have to be careful, and I think we are working now along the concept rather of altruism, where the idea is that the individual, the data subject, can choose to participate to a certain data sharing, to a certain scheme in which he or she believes that there is a public good, but it should, for any reason, at a certain stage, decide the data subjects should decide that the public good has not been reached, or for whatever reason, it should be entitled to withdraw this such concern as well. So this is an important perspective, an important point for from a perspective of fundamental rights, data protection, and consumer protection.
Lucrezia, if I can
yes.
interrupt you on this point, there's an ongoing debate about how to foster the condition for this data sharing to occur. As you said, there are a lot of instances of data donation, data philanthropy. That's how we refer to this voluntary data sharing, but pretty anecdotal, meaning the supply and the demand of data is not necessarily happening to the extent we would like. Do you think the Commission in the future will be considering mandatory data sharing as a possible solution, or it would rather take a different perspective that will be looking more at creating an enabling environment that will be incentivizing both the demand side and the supply side, exactly what is not happening? I know you cannot go too far because this is an ongoing matter for you, but just to get a sense of the philosophy around the idea of data sharing and reusage of data.
I mean, when it comes to mandatory, there are some conditions by law where we can ask for mandatory data access to a property, including data. So it needs to be, for instance, essential, an essential facility, other boxes, other requirements that we need to look at. In some sectors, that can be the case. I'm not excluding, but what we are focusing mainly now is, as you were saying before, to create an enabling environment which could be adapted to all the sectors. So I'm working on these conditions, and this can be facilitating the creating the rules for this sharing of data, which clarifying some of the rules, but also, if we go back at the individual perspective, providing some tools for the individuals to be at the center of this exchange. And I think Else before mentioned the portability right. What we are looking at is how to clarify the portability right, how to work on concrete proposals of tools to make this portability right effective, including tools to manage the data, tools to decide to share the data, and tools also to better allow also the switch of the data between various providers. And these tools can be of a different nature, can be completely decentralized, but could be also, we could also think about an intermediary tools to which the various data subject can decide to give a mandate for the management for a certain purpose. It could be, for instance, reaching a more sustainable environment for the use of their data, for the reuse of their data. I have to say, it's very important that for this to work, especially if we think along the lines of data sharing between government and business, that the purpose of this data sharing is shared by the data subject, and for this, the data subject should be involved also at the very beginning. We could think of various processes, and I think partially it has already been done also in the past, in which the public authorities decide how to use what to use this data for. So, in my view, the role that should be given and the possibilities that should be given to data subjects, consumers, would be at the beginning to decide for which purposes and this sharing should happen, even especially if this is done at local level. The consumers have then to be provided with all the information, and finally they have to be empowered to decide to participate to the scheme, to withdraw when they don't what they should they want to, and also to decide how to manage the data where they are taking part in the scheme.
Thank you, Lucrezia. Let me turn to Kate to get a sense of what is the Google position on data sharing and what kind of incentives are needed to make sure that a company like yours will be embracing data sharing even further beyond data donations and the instances you already referred to.
Sure.
Kate.
Yeah, no, I think in some cases sharing data sets makes perfect sense. In other cases, it's actually more useful to share the tools that that derive from some of the data that a company like ours has. So just examples of this in terms of data sets. I mean, sharing tens of millions of images or videos that are annotated and labeled so that researchers or companies can use that to drive whatever innovation they find useful for that, whether that's image recognition, natural language processing in the case of speech data that's been properly anonymized and labeled. So in those cases, data sets like that can power innovation and growth in key areas where machine learning, and there's a wide range of research benefits of it. Another case is in where AI and machine learning comes to play is our work on machine learning to more efficiently cool Google's data centers. So we talk about that all the time, about using that capability to reduce energy for cooling by 30%. But we don't just want to apply that internally for us. We want to make sure that that technology and that capability is available for others. And the way we do that is developing controls that can deliver those same kinds of energy savings through solutions that we provide to building management software providers. So I think there's room for a range of approaches to data sharing, and also making sure that data-driven innovation is available to the wide range of stakeholders that can benefit from it in the single market. We do think that data sharing mechanisms should be voluntary, as you mentioned, kind of setting the conditions to enable that. They obviously need to have the proper privacy protections, but also intellectual property protections and business confidentiality safeguards that protect the users and help companies bring these products to the market.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you very much. I see that in the meantime, Sergei Lagodinsky, our political representative today, coming from the Greens from Germany, has been joining us. So I like to turn to him now and to get a sense of his own take on the European digital single market as an ambitious enterprise, and how, from his perspective, from the Green perspective, we need to do in order to make it beneficial to consumers. What are the issues that need to be prioritized on this, Sergei?
Thank you so much, and it's great to see you again now in this setting, and it's great to be part of the discussion. And indeed, we're looking forward to seeing the proposal by the Commission. As far as I understand, in the mid of November, we will have a legislative proposal coming from our colleagues. But we, of course, have certain visions and certain hopes. And I think we talk about single market all of the time. We talked with with Commissioner Vestager, Vice President, just yesterday in our subcommittee on artificial intelligence about that. And I think it is important to see that it shouldn't be just a single market. It should be a fair market, and it should be an open market and a green market. what I mean by fair market, it should not be a market for the big ones. And with all due respect and admiration for the Google work, it should be a market where we do not submit ourselves to a monopolist like Google. It should be a market open and accessible to small and medium enterprises, and we need to find ways and to design the governance structures in a way where this is possible. Number two, it should be a market which does not infringe on the openness. So we need more open data sets, because this is what invigorates innovation. And this is also what creates trust, that this is not just an exclusive matter, but it is a matter which is open. And we have examples even now generated by, for example, public entities, and their municipalities and public sector can go and show it by its own example. We have in Berlin, for example, where I'm now, open data on traffic, on even the breadth or the wide, how wide the streets are. Can you keep 1.5 meters distance during the COVID times? Where can you do it? Where is it accessible for wheelchair users, etc., etc.? So data like this, opening it and giving an opportunity for kind of an open source access there. And the last one, something that we should not forget either. We have only in Germany, and it was pre-COVID, we had more energy and more CO2 emissions produced by internet use than by the flight industry. And it was before COVID. Now it's probably even worse. So if we're talking about the servers centers and the data centers, we need to get to a situation where we do not only talk about advantages for the green economy, which is true, and we support this. Of course, Green Deal without artificial intelligence, without data set would not be possible. But we need to have kind of a balance sheet, and not just to see only the positives, but also to calculate in also the negatives, which is the CO2 emissions that we have. And it's not just because I'm green. I think it's always important to see at cost and benefits and to regulate it accordingly. So these are just a couple of things regarding the single market principles that we should be guided into the future.
Thank you, Sergey. I think it's very useful to get your perspective in and to get a sense of how our speakers might react to that. I know that Google went on renewables already a few years ago, so it's fully sustainable from that perspective. It's renewables is not necessarily the ideal word, but it was certainly pioneering this. So we don't necessarily need to talk about this, Kate, but how would you react on some of the points that were raised by Sergey in relation to the current conversation and the role that a company like yours could play in making this market beneficial to all consumers? Kate.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we totally agree that portability of personal data should be easy for people in digital markets, that kind of mobility is key to boosting competition, and that it does boost competition by offering opportunities to move data to any service provider that a user wants. So that's why our takeout feature allows the export of data of all, of 70 of our products, whether that's Chrome or Gmail or Drive. You can move something like your Google Doc right to Microsoft Office Doc, and we're always trying to expand that. And encourage really the Commission and others to look at those direct forms of portability, like service to service, as reinforcing the already really strong portability rights set forth in GDPR.
Thank you. Now turn to Els in order to expand with our conversation. We have been discussing about data reuse. You're talking about data sharing a lot, but now a growing number of consumers claim that when it comes to Internet of Things, and Lucrezia introduced IoT applications, consumers should be able to have a better control of the collection and use of data via their personal devices. You already referred to that briefly, Els, in your introductory remarks, but how can we ensure fair rules here? What are the models that Euro consumers would like to see develop?
Well, yeah, it's true that consumers provide and generate a huge amount of data through the use of IoT services, be it interconnected cars, smart speakers, smart watches. And these data, they have a significant value for businesses. It enables them to develop new products, but let's be frank, it's also gives them sometimes a competitive advantage over rivals that don't have access to amount of data. But let me just stress here again that also when it comes to IoT, these data are provided or generated by consumers. So to a certain point, they should be able to be in charge of it and decide who gets access to it, under what conditions, and when they do agree to have access to it, they should get something tangible in return, an innovative service, solutions. Also when it comes to IoT data. Now, this is the ideal world. The reality, unfortunately, nowadays is somehow different. In practice, it's very difficult and even impossible for consumers to know, to control the flow of data they are generating through IoT services. They do not know which data firms are using or sharing with others or for what purposes. In fact, it's the data holders that get to make the decisions nowadays, not the data providers, not the consumers. And that's why it's so important that also this is tackled within the new strategy, the new data strategy of the European Commission. I mean, we're all in favor of having a very well-functioning digital single market. Well, this includes having empowered consumers, also when it comes to IoT. Only that way they can play their role. And that's why it's essential that measures are taken to empower consumers to exercise their rights, be it rights in privacy or data protection. And of course, this goes in hand with a strong enforcement, because without enforcement, you can make as much rules as you want. If you cannot enforce it, you won't have any effect. So empowering consumers to exercise their rights with enforcement is a very important and we should tackle. But what's also very crucial, and it has been highlighted before by many of our speakers, is that the right to data portability needs to be a real right to data portability. And this means that it needs to be reinforced and expanded, because consumers need to be in full control. Having a strong and feasible data portability is an absolute must and necessary precondition to have a digital single market. And I'm very happy to hear the positions that have been made of creating personal data spaces, and I'm very happy to hear that also the Commission is thinking of providing concrete tools to consumers to be enabled to enable them to be in charge of their data. But next to the more legislative part and what the Commission is covering, and they are doing a very challenging and, from what I hear, a very promising work. But next to them, I would also might want to address two other stakeholders to that regard. And the first of them is businesses. I would like to invite businesses to also embrace this. Don't be afraid of it. Don't see it as a threat, but see it as an opportunity. I mean, with strong consumers on board, trusting you with their valuable data, you can do pretty amazing, innovative stuff with that. You can create many innovative products and services, also solutions that can contribute to the green transition. So next, so definitely I would want to invite the businesses to get on board as well, and really embrace this opportunity and provide consumers with this empowering tools. Another stakeholder, and then I'm looking more into my own direction and my own organizations, are actually the consumer organizations. I mean, managing your data all of the time, deciding who gets access, who gets to use them to create new tools, when do you need to retrieve them? it can be a very time-consuming and not always easy to follow. And I think here as well, consumer organizations has an important role to play. They should be there to support consumers in their path towards more sustainability. I mean, so I think, and I'm also looking in my own direction, that consumer organizations should step in and take a bit of the burden off the shoulders of consumers. And who know, maybe even act as an intermediary or maybe some kind of data broker. These are definitely options that need to be explored as well. But I think with having all three of these items, having the legislative framework coming from the European Commission, having businesses on board and support from consumer organizations, I think we can do very good things for consumers to empower them in favor of a more sustainable future.
Thank you, Else. We are coming to an end, but before doing this, I would like to give a chance to each of you to have a final line. So if you could, just in a few words, 60 seconds each, to tell us how do you expect the single market for data to look like in 5 years' time? What do you see? What do you predict? What is going to be the key feature of such a market? Sergey.
Well, it's difficult to tell because, how could we have predicted the situation now? I just came from the discussion on automated society where the algorithm watch and Bertelsmann couldn't even predict last time that we will be automated to the degree that we are now. But I do think that it is important that we use this opportunity to create a level playing field for various actors, including open source actors, but also the big giants, and where we will get the synergy of that would allow us to follow up on that, and strengthening the human-based and centered approach that we keep talking about. Because this human-centered approach will not come from heaven. It will not fall down from the skies. We need to design it. And this is what we're trying to do now in the Parliament. This is what we hope the Commission will also propose in the upcoming weeks. Let's join our forces. And of course, we need more stakeholders and experts to be involved in those processes and in this market.
Thank you, Sergey. Lucrezia, your final message and prediction.
Yeah. What I would like to see in how I would like the single market for data to look like is, first of all, a market that is fair. I think the Commission, even also the President, said that we want now an economy that is fair and just, and this applies to the data economy as well. But the fairness of data is one of the key principles of the GDPR as well. So for our portfolio, being in charge of data protection, this is very important. This means that consumers should be, as I said, data subject and consumers should be at the center of the data economy, should be enabled to choose the use of their data in an active way, also to manage their data. And we are ready to work on our side together with the European Parliament. It's good to hear that we have aligned objectives in this to make sure that the consumers can have all the tools, practical tools to do that. But also we are ready to work also on improving the skills of consumers in doing that, because it's very important. We need to invest a lot to have more data analysts in Europe, but we also need to invest in improving the average data skills of European population, and also to think about the most vulnerable consumers and the people among us, and to provide for appropriate solutions for this.
Thank you, Lucrezia. I need to
say last word.
Yes, last word.
Just to say that the consumers agenda that the Commission will also adopt soon. We'll also have some important initiatives and important roadmap in this effect.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for hinting to that. Kate, your own prediction, how the world is going to look like in 5 years' time when it looks at digital data in Europe.
Sure, maybe more aspiration than prediction, but I think what we would love to see is harmonization of rules, consumer empowerment through control and transparency, the use of data to its potential in sustainability and beyond, free data flows within and outside a single market with protections that enables the kind of human activities that everybody wants to pursue, whether that's communication or remote work or artistic and scientific connectivity and collaboration. It's strong and smart, harmonized regulation and support of innovation to get quickly to users and businesses and consumers.
Thank you, Kate, for sharing with us your own aspiration for the future. Thank you to all our speakers. Today, there would be Marco Pierani from Euroconsumers wrapping it up, in particular, giving us a preview of what the Euroconsumer Forum is going to be like. It's going to be opening in a few days. So to Marco now. Thank you again, everybody.
To thank exactly, first of all, you for guiding us in this series of Approved by Tomorrow webinar. This is the last webinar before the Euroconsumer Forum. We have explored with the Euroconsumer approach some sectors of the market in different meetings, online meetings. This we decided to launch with this situation we are living with, that is COVID-19 crisis. But I think and I hope that this occasion were also a nice tool and good tool to confront each other in a constructive way. Of course, there are many problems, and COVID-19 made also more difficult the life of consumer and citizens. And we need institutions, consumers, and market players, big or small market players, to collaborate in order to create and launch a more responsible and sustainable economy in the post-COVID era. This is exactly the theme of and the subject matter we will deep dive on the 19th of November in the Euroconsumer Forum. This will be a connected event connecting five cities, the cities where our national organizations are based. So it will be connected Brussels, Rome, Lisboa, Madrid, and Sao Paulo. Also, we are present also in Brazil with our colleagues of Proteste. I have to. They told me that I have to unveil some information, but not too many. So I can say that we will be very happy to have a keynote of Commissioner Reinders, Commissioner for Justice, but also for Consumer Protection. So this is very key for us, given our specificity as consumer organization. We are proud to have him with us with the keynote. We will have again also this year both Google and Amazon as main partner of the event, and we will have discussion and a real discussion with them, because the concept of Approved by Tomorrow for us, that is the guideline of this approach, is to have real confrontational and discussion to build the new situation and new economy. We don't want to speak about the recovery of the economy. The title of the Euroconsumer Forum this year is Approved by Tomorrow for a Sustainable Rebuilding of the Economy. We don't want to speak the recovery, but rebuilding, because we think that the economy of tomorrow should be different than the one we experienced before. So we are living in a crisis, but we need to take the chance to treat this as an opportunity. So we want to have a more sustainable economy with the contribute of all the actors, and the consumer should be at the center of this revolution. Probably I didn't discover too many things, but please keep connected to our website. There is only a teaser for the moment at euroconsumerforum.com, but it will be very soon much more, and we will announce other and more important things before the 19th of November. You are all invited, and this is not to close this loop of series. This is was from the beginning driving to the Euro Consumer Forum in our idea, but this doesn't finish here. We restart. We are always restart because we want to improve life of consumers, and it's a big challenge because we are living in a big challenging moment, and we need to have collaboration of everybody. Thank you very much for your attention, and an appointment is for the 19th of November in the afternoon.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon.